We're live.
We're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome.
Welcome, everybody. We are automatically live. We didn't do a countdown. We see you in the chat. We know you're ready for this webinar. Last I checked, we had a lot of people signed up for this. Shout out to Mel. I see her joining. Hello to all of you. And we are here with some really cool people today. We have Aaron and Alex joining us. You, of course, know Ryan and I, so I don't think we need to intro ourselves. But if you are new to Wakelet, Ryan and I are Team Wakelet, and we have brought in two of our Rockstar ambassadors to join us for this session to talk more about your students and how they are so much more than just a test score. So we're going to let Alex and Aaron intro themselves. Take it away.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Erin Holland. I am a digital learning and teaching facilitator in Onslow County Schools, North Carolina. So shout out to everyone joining from North Carolina. And I'm very excited to be joining this webinar today. I think this is such an important topic, especially as we look to start the year. We'll be welcoming our students back in just a few weeks. So I think this is very front of mind for all of us.
And I'm Alex Isaacs. I'm an ed tech coach at the Long Branch Public Schools District. Very excited to be here today as well. You know, when I was invited to be a part of this session, once I started hearing about that it was going to be dealing with standardized testing and alternative assessment, I kind of got a feeling in my stomach as a former math teacher, but couldn't be more excited to be here today. I appreciate all of our friends being here as well. And I'm just so excited to share a couple of different ways that we could assess our students, something a little bit more than just assigning them a score and saying, this is where you're at.
Very much so.
So I think what I want to do, Ryan, is it okay if we like shout out, especially for Aaron and Alex, because I see them getting shout outs in the chat. I'm not sure if they're able to see this, but we have lots of people. So if you see anybody that you know, Aaron and Alex, please shout them out. Tell us where they're from, how you know them. And then Ryan and I'll do the same thing as we're watching. And someone's already hashtagging Team Chaos. Yes.
Tanya, I will share. She's from Texas. Amazing stuff down there. Her, I believe, Adobe graphic was really epic to show the Team Chaos and represent. So that was one that really stands out. I mean, there were voices, there were effects, you know, really just working it to the fullest. And one of the best people in the ed tech game, in the education game, just so appreciative of the support. And Mel as well, who's in Malawi now in a new adventure. So excited to have her join as well, but just really couldn't be more thrilled to be here and see so many of our friends.
Yeah, especially those of us that like we don't know in person, but those of us that we know really well from the app formerly known as Twitter. I just love seeing them here too.
That's awesome. And I see, Jackie, Gretchen, Chad from the Wakelet team. I see so many people on here that we've connected with and we've made moves with. And I'm just really excited to see everybody here to engage in what I think is going to be a very solid discussion today, something that might challenge the way that you or your district may propose how you look at some of these evaluations forms in your district.
Yeah. So Ryan, you want to give everybody an overview. Ryan and I like to give an overview of what we're going to be covering today. And remember, everything that you see, we are going to share with you at the very end of the webinar. So no worries about that. If you see somebody asking in the chat, just remind them, we will share those links. I have them all ready to give to you, but let's see what we have going on for the next hour.
We do. So what you're going to see is we're going to have, I skipped over it. So for those of you who are like, oh, there's a QR code, but he just went too fast. I'll pan back up. Don't worry. We're going to start by talking about what are alternative assessments overall. What do they mean? What do they look like? How do they affect education today? Then we're going to get into some of our experts here. So we're going to talk about inquiry-based content curation mastery, and that's going to be Aaron, going to take us through some really great showcases. Alex is going to bring his fire choice boards and real world projects. Like every time he shares one of these, I'm always just blown away by the creativity. Lots of inspiration to take away from those. And then I'll follow up with a little bit of learning portfolios and what that looks like to collect and showcase your students in their own successes and celebrate them for the people that they truly are as well. So we do want to have your thoughts, and what we can do is we have a Menti poll that we would like to have you take part in. So for those of you who are joining, you can join two different ways. We can go ahead and scan that QR, and it's going to ask you a question that you can put your poll question response into. And then we'll also put the link in there. And what we'll see is it's going to ask you, standardized tests are an effective way of measuring students' learning, understanding, and skill. Is that something that you agree, disagree, or that you are unsure of? And go ahead and submit your answer. And then what we'd like to see is in the chat, if you could maybe put the reasoning behind why you selected what you selected, because we want to see and hear from what your answers are as far as what is the reasoning behind your response. So we'll give you a minute.
Yeah, and there's that QR code. Just scan the QR code, then you'll be able to answer that question. We're interested to hear what you have to say about standardized tests. And I love that Jennifer is already hopping in and starting the conversation. She says she's unsure because it is only one way of measuring. And I love that, Jennifer. Thanks for leading that conversation.
And we'll give you another minute or two just to submit your answer if you can. And then we'll see you and check in on the poll results that come up. And while we're waiting, Aaron or Alex, any thoughts? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know you, I don't know if you scanned or submitted your response on this poll as well. But is there anything that you two would like to share about your thoughts on the question?
Well, I love how Gretchen chimed into the chat and said there's so much diversity among our learners that if we think of the word standardized, that doesn't really support that diversity.
I love that. Great point.
And a lot for me, again, former math teacher here, I kind of witnessed firsthand how at times it could, dishearten some of my students. It could cause some disappointment getting results many months later, how that could be a little bit of a challenge to actually take the data and put it to good use. So for me, it was really about, what other ways can we do to assess our students in ways that are preparing them for 21st century skills that they need to be successful? And, through choice boards, through alternative assessments, that's something that's far more possible to achieve.
Perfect. Tisha, how about you?
Well, I think you know how I feel about this. Donna from Miami and I did a webinar on standardized tests and alternative assessments for Community Week back in June. And just like we've been talking about in the chat, that is just one way to assess where students are. And I think from my experience, one of the things that I struggled with as a teacher, but also as a parent, is having students take these tests and then the results are not coming until 4 and 5 months later. And by that time, your students are not the same student, right? They've had all of these new experiences. They may have had some new struggles. So I think it's really difficult to say that that is the only way. And of course, I'm not going to say my catchphrase because Ryan will give me a hard time about it. I'll bring it back later at the end. But I really struggle with that being the only way to assess students because there's so much more to them than just a number.
And I like, you didn't say your catchphrase, but I know Chad put it in the chat. That's a little tweak on it, but he said it is a way, but there are better ways. And I think that's what's most important is, not every student is a great test taker. And it's,
I was going to say
on a single day. It's what happens.
It is.
That whole feeling of just that one day dependence on what is going to showcase for next year's teacher isn't always the best answer for what.
Yeah, look at the chat, Ryan, and I don't know if you can see it, but I just want to read a couple of things. And let me go ahead and pop some things on the screen here because I think this is really important. Our own team member James says, "I did not test well, but thrived in other forms of assessment, so presentations and coursework." I think that is really telling because if I look at James today, I would say he is incredibly successful. The interesting thing about that is, and I'm going to share something publicly that I've never really shared shared before publicly, but it goes to this piece. Is when I was first becoming a teacher, I had taken all of my classes. And of course I had a really good, I think I had a 4.0. I took the teacher exam. I had a couple of them and I did not pass all of them on that first try. And I remember feeling so shameful about that and thinking that really told the story of how good or not good of a teacher I was going to be. And I think we've conditioned our students to believe that one number is really telling their whole story. And so in order for us to teach them how not to think that way, we have to model that for them every single day.
Exactly. So let's take a look at those results and just see what came in. So, 53% of you, as it refreshes here, 53% of you agree that standardized tests are an effective way of measuring students' learning, understanding, and skill. 27% disagree, and 20% are on the fence, kind of unsure about whether standardized tests have that application to really showcase just what the students can do. Anything interesting pop out of that?
I'm surprised by the results. I thought it might be a little bit more skewed the other way. So it's a little bit surprising to me.
Same here. I would have thought the same thing.
Do you think, and this is just a question for the panel, but also for all of you in the chat, so you can answer this, but do you think that part of the reason that our educators and even our students think that it's maybe the only way or the best way is because they are unsure of how maybe to execute or implement the alternative assessments in their classroom? Do you think maybe that could be part of it? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I definitely think as an educator, that's such a huge part of kind of how we've been trained, how we've been conditioned. But kind of back to the comment that was just on the screen, it is really important to have that timely feedback, those conversations with students if we are using those test scores. But I think one of the issues that we run into, and it's been mentioned already, is how long sometimes it takes to get those results back. And then our students are kind of left in the dark as to how that performance was. And as teachers, it's hard for us to take and use that data effectively to help our students grow and continue to learn. So I do think that the testing scores can definitely be a part of the equation, but the timeliness and the feedback and the follow through are really important.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think a lot of people would agree with that. And it took me a really long time, Erin, as an educator to even get to that point where I could guide students in that feedback and reflection process. So hopefully some of the ideas that we have for you today and some of the things that Alex and Erin are going to share with you and Ryan and I will help you, if you're unsure of how to implement those into your classroom, will help you get to that point where your students are reflecting, where they are getting that feedback from you, and where you're both having some action items to move forward from even that, the STAR testing data. As Tanya said, in Texas, I've been checking my son's portal all week. We still don't have the results. And so it's really unfortunate because they're starting school on Monday. They're going into a brand new grade without those results. So hopefully we can give you some good strategies on how to implement that and take the two, because the two together will help you really see that whole student. So Ryan? We're
going to turn it over to you, Tish. You're going to go first.
Okay. Well, I'm ready.
We're going to talk about what are alternative assessments.
Okay, Ryan took himself off, but I'm still here with you. So we want to talk about what are alternative assessments. And so I think the interesting piece to this is that a lot of times we are unsure of what alternative assessments can be. In our planning piece, as we were just discussing this as a panel this last week, we had some discussions about it. And I think that's always my encouragement. Don't try to work out what alternative assessments are just on your own. Make sure you're having a conversation with other educators, with other people in the field. But here is a snapshot of what alternative assessments can look like for you. It's a lot of project-based learning. So having the students applying their knowledge to create a product or something. They are creating something. And I think that's why, Alex was shouting out Tanya for her graphic. Tanya is a really good model for her students on creating things to show learning. And that's really what that project-based learning does. Performance would be demonstrating a skill. So your students are, instead of just saying they can sing, they are performing, they are doing public speaking practice. Of course, that we talk portfolios all the time, and it is because we believe in portfolios so much. It gives the students the ownership, the autonomy, and it really puts them in that place that Erin was talking about, that reflective learning, which is the powerful piece for students to know where are they going. And then, of course, presentations. I'm sure everybody on the panel today would tell you that we can't get up here and even talk about what we're talking about without presenting and discussing what we're going to talk about and practicing that, because it doesn't just come naturally. So your students, the same way, have them do presentations. If they're presenting on it in any capacity, they are learning that material. It forces them naturally to get in that space. And then problem-based, anything problem-based, having them solve a problem, whether it is in their local community, whether it's a global problem. And yeah, Jennifer, we're going to talk podcasts and infographics and scripts. I'm going to show you that. I'm going to have Ryan actually go ahead and scroll down for us. The next graphic, and shout out to Elle on our team for making this graphic for you. And she's brilliant. Shakes all of my text and makes it look really, really good. But you can see, real world problem solving, like I said, learning portfolios, student-led interviews, which would be the podcasting, but it also could be in-person interviews. You could have video recorders there doing that, but it could be microsites and progress tracking, and everything that you see here is for your students. It also could be used for you as well, because don't forget, you are also a learner and you also want other ways to show that you know what you're doing. So I think these are really, really reflective of both you and your students. But this is just a quick snapshot of what alternative assessments are. And of course, it is not the entire list. I have put some research below that. I always like to back things up for research. I don't like just saying it. It's not coming from my brain. So I want to give credit out there. But there is growing recognition of the power of learning by doing. And I think since 2020, a lot of districts are seeing, they're having to guide their students to show their learning, and it also will motivate their students. So I want you to kind of remember that part. If your students are doing something, it's active learning. And you want them to be doing more than you are doing. And then sort of last, is rubrics. So we talk a lot about rubrics. I'm a fan of rubrics. The reason I'm a fan of rubrics is because not only does this keep your students on goal and seeing what they need to hit within that project or that learning portfolio or that choice board or whatever you're giving them, but it also helps you make sure that you are assessing them and you're checking off those things. And it makes you think through, what do you want them to be doing at the end of that project? What's the end goal? You're pulling in those, the state standards, the learning objectives. Of course, that's where you're starting. And so you know where you want them to end, but what does it look like? And can you model that for them? I think that's another piece that I want to tell you. Giving rubrics to students is awesome. It's even better if you can put together something to show them so that they can see it. A lot of them are more visual, and it just helps really with that inclusive learning. And then the next graphic, and we're going to give you all of this, so you're going to have all of this at your fingertips. It's going back into what I talked about with your students. When you're thinking about alternative assessments, when you're thinking about learning portfolios or choice boards, you're going to see some examples from Alex and Erin. They didn't just randomly come up with these because it was the thing to do. They were really trying to meet their students where they were and give them choice and voice. I saw that in the chat. So, show your students this, where am I right now as a student? Where am I? What do I need to work on? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Where am I going? Like, what is that end goal? Again, you have to paint that picture for them as the educator. And then also, what's next after that? So just because you got a learning portfolio and they turned it in, if you're not doing anything with that and you're not giving them feedback in order for them to improve that, you sort of just stopped that whole process. So you want to make sure that you have action items and they have action items, and you're coming together really to help move them along and elevate and empower them. And then I've just included a graphic here. This is an example of a single point rubric. If you are not familiar with single point rubrics, I read about it first with Jennifer Gonzalez. She does a great blog. So if you're not familiar with her, but I love it because it simplified the rubric for me as the educator. And all of you out there know that I'm the captain of Team Chaos. It was really easy for me to get lost in all the different levels and all the different things that I was asking my students to do. So for me, as their educator, it helped me kind of pinpoint what I wanted them to hit. And it also made it so that I could quickly give them feedback and little points of improvement or things that they were, exceeding at. So it helped me become a better educator. You definitely don't have to use a single point rubric. You're going to see some examples from Aaron and Alex, and we're going to give you those as resources as well. So Ryan, back over to you.
Sorry, I was just trying to resize the images to make sure that they fit nicely for the screen for everybody. But yeah, and then I took myself off the screen. So great time. But I'm here. Don't worry. I'm back. Anything about this single point rubric? I just want to make sure before we move forward.
I mean, I wasn't checking the chat because I was talking, but I think here, I'm going to pop some things on the screen. They help assess students, and we can model them to be creative and challenging. And I think anytime you're having your students create, choice boards are a great way to get them started on that, so that you can get them to that portfolio level. Jennifer says she loves single point rubrics also. I'm not sure if Jennifer is also Team Chaos, but she says they're so much easier to read. And I think if you take that into consideration, I posted a TikTok and an Instagram reel yesterday or the day before about when we're talking Team Chaos and Team Control, are we thinking about our students? If our rubric is hard for us to read, imagine what it's like for the student who's dyslexic. Imagine what it's like for the students who have cognitive overload and can't even get past that first column. So I just really like the idea, and it helped me be better. So if I was better, I felt like my students were better. Ryan, did you ever use single point rubrics?
I did. And I often thought like rubrics were helpful for our students because they kind of provided that map, like that story of where they're headed, where they want to see at the end point. They knew what they're going to be, evaluated on. And I think that helps because even as educators, whether using Danielson framework or anything else, at the end of the year when your evaluation comes along, you know what you're going to be evaluated on. And how stressful would it be for you if you were just teaching all year long and you were told to, make a portfolio for your professional year, but you didn't know what they were looking for? And I think most of us, even Team Control versus Team Chaos, we would still be working together on that to be like, what do we put in this thing? We have no idea. What am I going to look at? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? So I think always identifying that a rubric could be helpful. It's a guiding light. It's that pointful map that helps point people in the right direction, that just says, this is what you're going to be looked at. This is what's going to be evaluated on. And it provides the stepping stones for them to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just popping some comments up. I'll go back in and pull some of those up, but I'm excited because Aaron's coming up next with inquiry-based examples and some content curation mastery. So I'm going to hop off.
Hi, everyone. I definitely wanted to kind of highlight something that Tisha mentioned about the rubrics and the fact that they give our students the chance to improve. And I think that's really important when we're talking alternative forms of assessment, because if we think about those traditional standardized tests, especially the ones that we give at the end of the year, there is no room for improvement at that point. The score becomes the score. So I think with a lot of the examples you'll see today, the biggest thing to kind of take away is that we're always giving students the ability to improve upon their work with our feedback, because that's what we want them to go forth and do when they leave our classrooms. So some of the examples that I am going to share with you today are just ways to try to help our students demonstrate their mastery, but in a form that maybe is a little more engaging for them, kind of meets their interests, meets where they are, but then maybe also mirrors something that they might go and do outside of school when they go into their future careers. So the first example I have is a teacher at my high school. Her name is Andrea Mason. She's an amazing science teacher. Instead of just taking our students through the different climate classifications and then giving them a test where they had to answer multiple choice questions about each of the different climate zones. She actually had them take on the role of a vlogger, and she had them vlog about their chosen climate classifications. So her students created travel vlogs to encourage people to travel to their climate zone. She created a rubric that she shared with them. She also posted an assignment on Microsoft Teams, so the students were very aware of the expectations. And then I did get permission to have 2 of the student examples included in here. And if you get a chance to watch them, they're amazing. But basically, these students were given the criteria of what they had to share about their climate zone. And then Miss Mason was able to see that they had mastered the information. They had met those learning standards, those learning targets, just based on their video. So as you can see here, Ryan's pulled up the criteria that they had to include in their vlog. And then they did some app smashing with Flip to create this Wakelet collection of their climate vlogs. And then what it did on the back end was it gave the whole class that collection of vlogs. So at the end of it, you have this whole running record of these different climate zones, and the students could watch each other's and learn that information more in depth from seeing and hearing from one another. So this was a great project. The student examples turned out so well. It was so fun and so cute watching their explanations as to why you should travel. But really, ultimately, the teacher could tell just from watching these videos that the students knew the content. They knew the information. They knew the different classifications of the climate zones. So this was a really fun alternative assessment that the students got really into. And that was the best thing, watching how excited they were about their work. Because I don't know about you, but I don't see too many students walk away from a multiple choice test feeling really excited. The next example is from an English class. And in North Carolina, our English language arts standards are very consistent throughout the grade. So this could be done in a lot of grade levels, which was why I liked this idea for a project. But basically, the students took a show or a movie that they liked, and they used that show or that movie to highlight the different elements of plot and literary devices. So again, instead of just having a multiple choice test or, a short answer where a student defines what is a theme, what is rising action, the students were able to take something that they were interested in, a show of their choice, and use that show to explain the different literary elements, to explain characterization. So again, the teacher was able to go through these student examples created in Wakelet, and the teacher was able to see that the students understand the literary devices, the elements of a plot, without just having a paper pencil test to show that mastery.
I think this might be the first time that Grey's Anatomy has made it onto a Wakelet webinar. So, we're broaching new subject matters here, and I love it.
And I just love that the students were able to choose a show that interests them. I love that the Friends example is like the first episode of Friends, which in some ways seems like yesterday, but in some ways feels like so long ago. So our young students are kind of into the things that we've been into for a long time, which is funny.
It's a terrific real world example to let them pick and choose something that interests them, but bringing that into the classroom because it really inspires them, right? That meaningful connection to content, again, is something that can't be understated.
Exactly. And it's been mentioned so many times in the chat, and Tisha mentioned it as well. Student choice. What difference does it make if I had given them the piece of literature to go through and analyze the elements of plot, or if they chose something that they were interested in? The difference is that they're going to be a lot more engaged, and that I'm going to get a lot better quality work, most likely, because it's something they are interested in.
Totally true. And that's something I'll reference later on too with that. Great point.
Yeah. And then here, as Tisha mentioned, Alex and I are huge fans of choice boards and rubrics. So I'm not going to talk too much about choice boards because I'm not going to steal Alex's thunder. But I have an example here that was created with me by a high school world history teacher. So she wanted to do something different. She was tired of just handing out a test. So she said, what are we going to do? She wanted her students working in groups. So I said, let's try student organized learning environments. We're just going to give them a big question, or in this case, a couple of big questions that they need to answer. And they're going to choose how they present that information. So the students were responsible for the research. The students were responsible for the product. And she gave them this choice menu. There are lots of items on here that they could choose from. So we were trying to make sure that we met everybody's interest, everybody's needs, because that's a huge thing about alternative forms of assessments too. We need to make sure that we're allowing our unique learners to all actually show us their mastery. We don't want them hindered because of the type of assessment we're asking them to do. We want to give them as many options as possible to show that they are mastering the content. And we even had a free choice option so they could propose a product of their own and have it approved by the teacher. So as the students were in their groups, they chose which item on the choice menu they wanted to utilize for their group, whatever they thought would meet their interests and meet their strengths, which is what I love. The students get to demonstrate their strengths as well as their mastery of the content. And then we also provided a rubric to go with it. And I think rubrics become very important when we're talking about alternative forms of assessment, because if you are just starting out with choice boards, or if you're just starting out with alternative forms of assessment, it might feel very overwhelming to have to come up with all of these different options and then figure out how to assess or how to grade every option. But a rubric gives you a way to assess whatever the students are completing in one way. It kind of removes some bias. It also puts all of the expectations out to the students up front so they know what it is they are going to be asked to do. And it removes some of those questions on the back end, like, well, why did I get this grade instead of this grade? This also gives you a starting point as a teacher to gear your feedback to your students towards the items on the rubric. So it becomes a little easier to maybe have those conferences later on where the students could improve before we give them that opportunity to improve their work. So this is an example of the rubric that we used for this student organized learning environment adventure that we went on in world history. And again, it was just great seeing the different student products and seeing their ownership of them that they took, because they made the choices and they knew what they wanted to do, what they had to do, and they were very proud of what they came up with.
That's awesome. They're awesome examples. And I'm glad you put so many of those student samples so that our community can go back through later on. They can click through, they can watch, they can learn, they can see exactly what the students were able to do. Because a lot of times I'm sure it's come up in the chat and I really can't see the chat because I got a lot of windows going on here, but I'm sure you always get that question like, oh, it's great that it's working for Aaron, but it's not going to work for my kids. And we'll get past that at some point in time. Like it will. It's just that trust, right? There's always that scary effort of like starting something new or implementing something for the very first time. Yeah. But the proof is in those student samples. And you see that students can do a whole lot more than we give them credit for. So I love those examples.
Don't be afraid to ask your students what they want to do. Don't be afraid to give your students a voice in coming up with those alternative forms of assessments, because they will tell you. We just had some survey data from our staff, our students, and our parents from last year. And the students said they wanted more feedback. They wanted more notes about their work. They wanted that time to hear from their teachers where their improvements needed to be made. And with rubrics, we can really help guide that conversation. And with alternative forms of assessments, we can really help put the power in the students' hands to show us what they can show us. And then we can have those conversations with them on what more we'd like to see.
Excellent. Excellent stuff. Now we're going to switch. Thank you, Aaron. You've kind of led right into our next amazing expert here. So we're going to bring Alex up as well. And Alex is going to start with his amazing choice board. So it was like a complete seamless transition. So Alex, the stage is yours.
Ryan, expert, you're just too kind. I know it's because I selected team control. Okay, you don't have to warm me up. I really appreciate it. So I really, over the last few years, I'm no longer a math teacher, but now that I am one, now that I'm just an ed tech specialist, I think back to my days of teaching students, and a lot of the reason why I started to incorporate tech was because, frankly, I was bored with the material. I was like, how am I going to make something that, oh my gosh, linear systems of equations? I mean, I can imagine people in the chat right now, their eyes are probably glazing over me just using those words to describe a very challenging concept. So me as a math educator trying to make the learning more meaningful, that was my primary goal when we were in hybrid, remote, every type of setting you could name. Once I really became more skilled with Wakelet, I really just, it took off with how it allowed me to really accentuate the different types of things that my students were doing well. So Ryan, if you want to click on that first collection, if there's anybody who's familiar with math, although I would venture to say that everybody out there has heard of the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. It's not a lot to it. So what I really decided to do was I said, okay, here are the learning objectives, here are the student standards. I had those made clear to my students what the expectations were, what the end goal was, and then I designed an activity based on that. And while I didn't provide the full instructions to this activity, the basic premise of this was students had a choice to create a real-world example of the Pythagorean theorem taking place. And we did this with Canva, and you can see that Ryan's going to click on a couple of examples. This is so much more meaningful to me as an educator, seeing that level of creativity. I feel like I'm becoming known as the guy who's just kind of that creative fellow who offers these choice boards and stuff like that. But in a subject like math, especially if you can incorporate choice and incorporate creativity opportunities, that's where you're going to see your kids shine. And these examples that were done by my students, and I want to say that this was one by Yolanda and Belen. I still remember that they were very much into aliens for some reason. And okay, I can only imagine what they're thinking now with some of the recent stuff that's been coming out in the news. But at the same time, this told me whether they were competent with the skill, the standards being assigned, but B, it helps me better get to know them. They had fun presenting this in front of their classmates. And Ryan, if you just want to scroll through really quick, the biggest thing that I can share, and I've shared this at many a webinar, many an instance where I get to talk about Wakelet, is their agency and their pride in work has elevated as a result of me using Wakelet. Ryan's going to see one there where misfortune is happening to me. That was Esmeralda. This is now 2 years ago, and I still remember who did these because it was that impactful. There's another one of me falling off the side of the building. So I'm okay with that as long as it's making the content a connection for my students. And I can tell you this project, as compared to a traditional assessment, this one wasn't as negative, Ryan, luckily enough. But they went on to my at the time Twitter and took images and removed backgrounds. And I'm not a fan of Roblox, but they did that anyway and made me look like a fool. So this was really just a collection that allowed my kids to shine, where I gave them that choice, scored them with a rubric based on their ability to follow a set of instructions, and I couldn't be more proud of them, of my Rockets at my previous school in Red Bank. If you want to go into the next one, Ryan, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, Alex, one thing I want to point out too about this is like making math fun and engaging, but also through tech. A lot of times we always hear, just like I referenced in the last time, like, that's great, but it doesn't work for the math classroom, right? Like, yes, it can, and you're showing examples of how. And I think that's what's so transformative. So when I say expert, it's because it's in a field, right, that many people were like, math doesn't translate to online or blended learning, and you're showing that it does. And that's what resonates.
It's really, for me, it's about being imaginative. Showing your creativity will hopefully get others to be involved as well. Now, this is a timeline template that I created recently. If you're assessing your students on the ability to either analyze a set of history or a historical figure or something along those lines, you could do a traditional type of assessment, or you could do a traditional paper and pencil type of timeline. And I'm sure you can make something really amazing. for me, I feel like making it more meaningful. This is one that I app smashed with Wakelet and Moat, where I offered an example collection. I always try to provide that for my students when I was working with them. Ryan, if you scroll down a little bit more in that middle section, you can click on that JFK collection. And if there's anybody who teaches social studies or history, imagine receiving, maybe not to this level because this was my sample, but imagine seeing this in conjunction with some type of wax museum project or a report that you're writing in order to demonstrate that competency in a completely new way while preparing our kids with those 21st century skills that they need to be successful. I took a course on Microsoft Learning that was all about 21st century skills, and it really resonated with me that kids are going to need to know how to use tech. They're going to need to know how to collaborate and critically think. AI is all the rage, but without that ability to critically think and collaborate with one another, regardless of demographic or circumstances, our kids are going to have a tougher time acclimating to the work world, to the collegiate world, to the academic world. So I feel very passionate about providing opportunities that allow kids to really show their knowledge in a way that's comfortable for them. And if anybody's planning on doing a timeline project this year, I would love to see you make a copy of this and use it in your own class as well. Those are just some heading ideas that you can add on some columns.
It's phenomenal because it's almost like a mini rubric, not necessarily an evaluative rubric, but you're telling them exactly what they need to get started, how they can get those aspects in place.
Well, Ryan, and no dissing to any teachers, any administrators out there, but I think that sometimes even we have problems following directions. So anything I could do to make directions more clear, more accessible. I was teaching multilingual learners. I just wanted to make it where they knew exactly what they needed. They could translate as needed. And Wakelet just does such a great job of having everything in one space so accessible. And those new immersive reader functions that have been built in, if I was still in the classroom, oh my gosh, would I be taking advantage of those analysis functions that you could do right here on Wakelet with the immersive reader. But the SAMR model app smashing project was something that I did actually for recent coursework that I completed. This is one that was more geared towards digital citizenship and using tech for good, the global SDGs. I linked ISTE standards on this one. And you could see that I basically set it up where column after column, they have a little task to do. And the task became progressively more and more globally involved, where by the end of this, if I were in the classroom, if Lois and I get the opportunity to, really build those connections worldwide, we hope to be able to connect classrooms with Empatico or have students join a collaborative flip group or classrooms from around the world join a collaborative flip group where we're sharing why it's important to have one of those pillars be something that we're keeping in mind. Why is it important to be informed in the digital age of media? And then again, developing those 21st century skills where part of that assessment could be an interview with another student from across the world, or, just collaborating on a project with a student in their native language or something like that. So, again, I also think that it's important with the Wakelet platform to think about if we're going to just a boring paper and pencil test, is that, I remember Erin saying it near the end of her presentation, is that instilling joy? Is that instilling a desire to want to run through a wall and succeed on an exam, on a test? So I feel like this could be such a better opportunity to really share what you know, share what you're passionate about. These choice boards give you that opportunity to show what I know, what I'm passionate about, and in a way that you're comfortable with. So I feel like maybe I've got to try to convince some of the teachers in my district to try to use this year. But this is one I would have been proud to use in my own class. Now, the last one, I had to go back to math. Math is always going to be near and dear to my heart. So, Ryan, if you wouldn't mind going into the first column and scrolling all the way to the bottom first. So what I want to tell everybody is it's not just right out of the gates you're going to develop this ability to do this. So what I did provide everyone was this was my more straightforward attempt early on at a choice assessment. It's a traditional math test, so to speak. They've got to be able to solve linear systems of equations. Again, I apologize to everyone saying those 4 words or whatever. They are going to have to do that, but they're choosing the question that they want to answer. So you can make it very low level, especially in math. Offer a bunch of questions that are very similar, and then simply go, okay, you've got to pick 2 out of these. Giving my students that level of choice made them feel so much more comfortable. And they were like, wait, what are we doing on this test? We're picking the questions. And I'm like, yes, I'm trying to develop agency, which I then had to define sometimes, but that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say, I want you guys to feel good about the questions you're answering. So I tried to incorporate different levels and just really tried to challenge my students in this way. So this is available to any pre-algebra or Algebra 1 math teachers out there. You want to dip your toe into the alternative assessment, that choice assessment pool, this would be a great opening point. But the Wakelet collection that I created here, again, I'm always starting by incorporating resources that allow my students to achieve so that they don't have to go searching anywhere. And then I chose like a menu style theme where first column, learning standards, student-friendly goals so that they know what the end goal is. And then, 3 platforms that I'm pretty passionate about, Formative, Kami, and Delta Math. I gave them that level 1 task. I gave them the option. Which one do you want to complete? I actually had my kids, the one bit of paper and pencil I was using at this point was either giving them a checkbox of saying which one they did for each part of the menu or just having them submit that on Google Classroom. So after the appetizer, kind of like lower level, entry level type of work, I then provided them some Edpuzzle options where I embedded 4 different choices for them to pick 2 from. Would I want my students to pick the ones that they're less confident with? Sure. But I'm still giving them that opportunity to have those videos embedded right in where they could then go off of those and show what they know in that way and pick the topic at the same time. And then finally, that highest tier, that dessert, although most people feel like dessert is like the best part of the meal. I don't know how my math students would feel about this because these were rather extensive projects. I'm giving them that overarching theme now for them to really prove that they know the concepts by creating their own Edpuzzle lesson or completing that Canva mini project. So again, I can't impress this upon everybody enough. This was built over hours and hours of trying to redefine what I wanted for my students. I did not automatically come into Wakelet and go, I'm going to make this, it's going to be amazing. It took a lot of time. It took a lot of feedback from my students. I was always doing Google Forms that were not anonymous. I wanted to know what student felt. At other times, they would be anonymous. I wanted to get their perspective. So I hope that anybody out there, and Jennifer, I appreciate your comments so much. Anybody out there who is trying to really start putting in those creative opportunities, I would encourage you to check out my profile. It's not just math or DigCit. I also have just simple creative opportunity collections. But just really start. If you're a math teacher, try that linear systems of equations choice assessment. And I'm almost guaranteeing that your kids will have a different perspective on math and otherwise. So, love presenting all these collections, Ryan. I felt like that linear systems Wakelet choice board, if Wakelet were to open a restaurant, that would kind of be the scene. That's what I was going for in my own mind. But always excited to present on Wakelet, and I appreciate you giving me the forum to do so, my friend.
Hey, the creativity, like I said, it speaks for itself. I love seeing different avenues. I love seeing people being creative and getting the chance to express themselves as an educator, but also bringing that heat, that fire, that passion for creativity into the classroom. Because a lot of times we talk about being passionate and creative in the classroom, but what are we doing to really bring that in? And I think that's what needs to happen is we need to provide that avenue. And that's why your stuff resonates so much, Alex. That's excellent.
I appreciate that. You got to lead by example, I feel. And I was proud to do that as a math teacher. Now I'm proud to do it as an ed tech specialist in Long Branch.
Perfect. So that's going to help lead right into more creativity. And I'm going to pop Tisha up, even though she probably doesn't notice. But I'm going to bring her up as well just to have another set of eyes on this while I go through and talk a little bit about learning portfolios. And what we talk about when we talk about learning portfolios, we've presented on this numerous times, but we just want to talk about a couple of things. Like, yes, it's reflective. Yes, it's creative, but we're infusing the ability for students to interpret, reflect, and analyze what is the best examples that showcase who they are as a student. And for teachers, it's not like we're just assigning them a project and we're not checking in on it. No, like it gives us that tracking and that piece and those data points to connect from the start of the year to where they at the end of the year. And we connect those dots and say, look at the progression of how much, more your growth has gone, and looking at the ability for students to see that feedback piece. Something that I saw the other day from Matthew Joseph, he was like, WD-40, it's a can of WD-40. And what do we know about that? And I was like, well, it's WD-40. And he's like, it took 40 tries to get the formula right. So no, they didn't get it right on the first time, and they were experts in their field. It took them 39 failed attempts to make that 40th version the best in the way that it is now, and an industry leader. And for students, like, it's important for them to know the portfolio you create first isn't going to be the best one. There's always going to be something that sticks and tweaks, and you're going to be like, oh, you know what? That was a good video, but this is a great video. Or this is a document that I was really proud of. This is an essay I spent a lot of time on, but here's another way to take that to a higher level. So I think it's just that ability to remind ourselves that, you know, we've referenced this before. Aaron said it, and I was like, we'll come back to that, Aaron. So it's a great lead into this as well. But we know when students have that behavioral, the emotional, the attachment to the work, we know they're going to perform better because they have that connection to the work. If I give them a worksheet, it's just done to be done, right? They don't want to do it. They're going to try to do their best maybe, but most people just do it to get it done. And what Wakelet wants to do is take that away from just compliance of doing the worksheet and getting into empowerment. And that's where student portfolios come in. And again, we don't care, but it's the ability for students to become engaged in the content more than just a worksheet, and then translate that around to be empowered by picking the bits and pieces that really fit the best to showcase who they are. And I feel a little guilty, but I'm going to showcase a couple samples, and this one's my daughter's. And I think it's important to showcase this, not because she is my daughter, but for a first grader. She's a first grader. She went hard on Canva as team control. This is a little bit too much for me to handle, so I always get a little nervous showing this. But the idea of her character traits, she had to do a Leader in Me School project. And it was, you know, make a trifold board or a presentation that documents your 3 leadership traits that you've acquired for the year, and one that you still would like to identify and grow on. And it could have been a trifold board. We could have printed it off and pasted it on there and had the old, you know, college try that everybody does. But she's like, I want to try something different. So we put it to the test, and I said, let's try Wakelet. And she was able to go in here, and using her iPad, she was able to narrate and dictate to the iPad so that it would help her type, do things a little bit faster. And she was able to record a flip video. So if you get a chance to go in and dive into this, you can hear my cute little daughter talk about the 3 character traits and what she feels she embodies and how. But it's much more productive for her to talk about that and get that presentation skill and talk about what it means versus just typing it and putting it onto a trifold board. And for here, she's able to take pictures and images of the speech that she was selected to give on Leadership Day, her creativity. But what she's doing is she's documenting for the very first time in first grade a collection of her best work for leadership traits. And when she looks back on this 2, 3, 4 years down the road, because it's a continuing school, Leader in Me is not going to end. Like, they're going to be able to add more leadership pieces to this. So you're able to see just what a first grader can do with a digital portfolio.
I think this is, I'm just going to interrupt you, Ryan, because I know that you are asked the same way that I am, even as an instructional technology specialist or digital learning specialist in a school district. A lot of times there was a lot of doubt with my elementary teachers, my little learners, you know, they weren't sure if they could do that. I think this is a perfect example to showcase that if a first grader can do this, then truly this is going to meet everybody all the way up past, you know, master's and doctorate degree learners. So I think it hits every learner. And I think that's why this is so popular. The chat is going crazy with this example, like always, just because it is really, really powerful to see what she's done on her own.
Yeah, the littles could do so much. So I love that, Tanya. That was a great quote. And you know, you look at someone like Benjamin, who's a CTE profile, and being able to document their journey through a CTE program, which, you know, sometimes the outcomes, they might not be looking to go to college. They might be looking to get into an industry or looking to showcase a talent or a skill. And they still need to have that portfolio to showcase exactly what it is. And I think that's great because you can pop your videos directly inside and the videos can live inside of here, or the writing samples that can be brought in and showcase that, you know, the essays are in here. And listen, sorry, my son's running around upstairs. But you can see the ability to pop and peek any kind of work and samples into this portfolio allows to showcase the students what they're made of, right? I mean, if it's a welder, if it's a beautician, if it's a cosmetologist, they need a trait to showcase just how good they are. And Wakelet portfolios or digital portfolios in general just provide that avenue for it. And eventually, all of your Kennedys in your school district, after many years, they're going to get the ability to be like Jenna, where you're in high school and you're making your All About Me collection and you're doing your clubs and you're going to have the best work of everything that you've put together. And then it's going to be time to apply for college. And we know colleges aren't just relying on SAT and ACT scores anymore. So how else do you differentiate yourself from the pack? And being able to put on that college application to share that link right out and pop it right into the college application and say, here's who I am as a student. Here's what I bring. Here's my service projects. You know, I'm more than just what's on the application. And I think that's super important, is that students get that tracking ability from year after year after year. It helps out. I love people are talking in the chat. I can see it now finally for the first time, the controlled chaos of my son upstairs. And then we get to Honora, right? And it's the most polished one that we've shown because it's the longest one that we've seen. And it continues to change and adapt. And I think that's the staying power for those digital portfolios, is once students have that vested interest, going back to that first image that I shared, that behavioral and that emotional interest in what they've created, this is stuck with Honora now that it's constantly being updated. And to the point that every time you come back, you don't know what you're going to quite see inside of the portfolio. But regardless of what's inside of there, you're seeing that progression from Kennedy to Jenna to Honora, you know, with Ben inside of there as well. Like, you're able to see that progression of what students can do. And we just know that students are going to be able to showcase exactly how they want to express themselves with Mote, whether it's videos, audio, arts, upload their images and pictures. They just get so many different ways to showcase what they're all about. Tisha, any last words about portfolios?
Well, I think what I want you to remember, and we've kind of all said this, and I think honestly, Ryan, if we can bring everybody up since we're towards the end, I think, you know, start little by little. Like Alex said, you're not gonna right out of the gate know how to do that. Just start with something like what Kennedy did and build upon that. And maybe it's not 10 artifacts. Maybe you just ask them to do 3 artifacts, right? It's all about step by step by step. All of us on this webinar didn't start off right out of the gate creating Alex level collections, right? It really, really took some time for us. And I think this conversation has been really important. The chat, I've been looking at the chat. I have multiple windows up. I know you guys know Team Chaos over here. I also posted a TikTok and an Instagram and a tweet at the same time, Ryan, you'd be happy to know, really talking about how to use Wakelet for your students, be thinking about, you know, how can you meet your students where they are? They are really engaged in social media, whether we want them to be or not. And we can't just say that we are preparing students for their future, whether that is college readiness or career readiness, without giving them the opportunity and the space to create, to fail in a safe space and know that that's okay, and to learn that they're not going to go to work and get a grade. They're not getting a grade, right? They're going to get some feedback, and they need to be able to understand how to receive the feedback, but also how to give really good feedback. And any of these alternative assessments, I think, are really, really going to help support you in supporting your students and truly get them ready for their future. So many great examples here. I've been putting the resource link in the chat. So scroll up if you missed it. And I also, while Ryan is telling you what your call to action is, I'm going to put the certificate link in the chat so you have that as well. So yeah. Ryan, what's the call to action?
We'd like for you to visit our student success page. So we'll put this into the chat. Tisha will go ahead and pop that in there as well, I believe. But we just want you to understand that students are so much more than a test score. You've seen multiple examples today about how we understand that alternative assessments, you know, can pack a punch to really bring your students' best work to light. We'd love for Wakelet to be a part of what you're doing at your school district. So if you navigate to this website, you can peek and pop around a little bit of some case studies, a couple of different students. You can learn more about what Wakelet has to offer to help support alternative assessments in your district. And you can click the little blue button to book a demo, not just with me, but somebody on the Wakelet team to help go over alternative assessments inside of Wakelet, what comes with our education and Education Pro plans to help support you and your districts, to help showcase that your students are more than a test score and bring their best work to light.
Absolutely. So that link is in the chat for those of you that want to check that out and book a demo if you are brand new to Wakelet. I've also put the Wakelet certificate link in the chat. So scroll up for that. You have the resources link. I know you were asking for those rubrics, those collection examples. You want to go copy all of Alex's and Aaron's brilliant collection examples. And I want to remind you, in addition to that call to action, so go book your demo with Ryan so you can learn more specific about portfolios and how students can utilize Wakelet. But I also want to remind you, if you're not part of the community, we want you to join the community. So I'm going to add that link to the chat. And in addition to that link, I am adding a link that even I visit very often and I share out. It is the community.wakelet.com/events page. I've shared that twice, not meaning to share that twice with you. So it's that important. We want you to know about upcoming events because Ryan and I know we have some really cool stuff coming up for you towards the end of August that we want you to be ready for. So, save the date, August 30th, I believe, August 31st, because we have some really cool stuff going. Gretchen, if it's not working, if that events isn't working, you're going to use that community link and just /events at the end. I'll pop that in as well. Let's see what else we have to talk about, Ryan. Let me see what I've got. We want you to all go follow the socials. So whatever social you're on, Wakelet's going to meet you there, whether that is TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube,
Threads,
X, formerly known as Twitter, and Threads. We're on Threads also if you happen to be on Threads. If you aren't and you are Team Chaos and it's too much for your brain like me, just don't even. But we're there if you are there. We want you to follow Wakelet because we have a cool contest going on right now. And you probably saw that in the chat, Team Chaos versus Team Control. And you have your team captains here with you. I am the captain for Team Chaos.
And I will be your captain for Team Control.
Yes. And we have our designated team members here now. I am going to beg to differ because I know Ryan and Alex, and I don't think that I just think it's a facade. I think they really want to be on Team Chaos with us. But what you're going to do is you are going to show your workspace, take a photo of your workspace, and we want you to post that on whatever social media you're on and hashtag your team. So Team Chaos, if you're with Aaron and I, and Team Control, if you are with Alex and Ryan. Show us all the examples of how you are part of that team. And what you will do is put yourself in the running to win one of these really nifty bucket hats so that you can join us and take some selfies. You may get confused, though, if you're split personalities like Alex Isaac's down there. He's never sure which team he's actually on. So you're going to see him in different versions of the hat. You see now he's a split personality for Team Chaos and Control. But we want you to participate. Be ready. I know school is starting. You're all getting ready for the new school year with your students. And we hope that this session has really, really inspired you to use alternative assessments in addition to your regular assessments. And we're just really happy that you've joined us. Ryan, Aaron, Alex, what parting words do you have for our guests today?
I just wanted to call out, if you are new to alternative assessments, choice boards, any of the things, hit the search in Wakelet and find things that other educators have made. They're there for you. Don't reinvent the wheel if you don't need to.
Yeah, I would echo that as well. You don't have to start from scratch. There's already some great collections. And I also just want to wish everybody a great school year, hoping everybody has a successful one. Hopefully, when it does get to that testing time, hopefully our kids do as well as they can, take it seriously, and we do our best to make them have some meaningful learning moments this year. But thank you so much again for the opportunity to be here. It was great speaking with all of you.
And don't forget to ask for help. I mean, there's always experts. There's always people around who will be willing to help you, get started, tutorials. They'll pop on a Google Meet. We're all here to support you. The whole Wakelet community is behind you. So for anybody who needs to reach out, we're one community. We'll help you, and we'll help you get started in the right direction with the full support of the team.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you again very, very soon. Bye, everybody.
Go Team Control.
Team Chaos.
Chaos.